Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. First up for T&D today, we have our King Leo D&D mug from King Leo D&D. Once again, friends of the show, go check them out. They do some really great work over on their channel. Inside of it, we have what I did not bring with me, the Unplug from Econ Tea. It's very kind of berry-y, but not quite so much as like the wild berry. It's a little subtler, but it's still pretty fruity. So if you like that, definitely check it out. I can't believe I didn't know about this before, but I discovered today a tea line called D&T. I do T&D. It is called D&T. So when that order arrives, I will be doing some of their stuff in series. I might do a whole episode on just their tea because I'm very excited about it. But I can't believe I didn't know that line existed. I knew there were like adventurers teas and stuff like that, but this one is specifically D&T, and I am excited about it. I have to keep telling myself not to say the thing that I do on this show because I keep getting mixed up. Not the point. I'm excited about it, and I hope you guys are too. If you know of any other random like nerdy tea brands, let me know because I want to get them. I want to try them. I want to do a whole thing because I am excited about that. It sounds pretty good. Anyway, continuing on from that, getting into what we're actually talking about today. Today, we are going over introducing a new player to your table. Now, you might be like, you've kind of talked about new players a lot in the past. Isn't this a rehash of the same stuff? No, not specifically. This is going to be generalized advice for adding a new player to an existing campaign. The best sort of ways to go about doing that to make it a more seamless transition. And so let's get into talking about that, shall we? This is going to be obviously mostly geared towards DMs. However, there are some good sort of ideas in here for how players can help to sort of integrate this new person into the game. So let's go ahead and let's take a little trip down this road here. I have this broken down into essentially 3 different steps, and by steps I mean 3 different items that you kind of have to focus on and emphasize when you're trying to introduce this new player. So hopefully these all make sense, and hopefully they all work together for you. They make a lot of sense to me. They're what I have done in the past, and I am excited to get to use them more in the future because every time I do it, I feel like I do it a little bit better. And so I like just sort of the sense that I'm getting better at something. And this is something that feels like, obviously it comes up a little bit more rarely, but it is something that you can feel yourself getting better at as you progress through them because you can go, that actually felt a lot better than last time. So let's say you've got a buddy who has been, they lived out of state, or you lived further away, or they are just gaining an interest in D&D and they have either moved back, asked you to be part of your game, whatever the situation is. You have a friend who would like to play D&D. You have a campaign that's going on. You have a spot at your table. And everybody else at the table is game for adding this person. That's an important first piece. Check with all the existing people that are at the table. Make sure that everybody is cool with what's going on, because it can lead to some headbutting if not. So assuming everybody is A-okay, ready to go, happy to have this new person in, or it's early in the campaign, so it's like, yeah, just go ahead and throw them in, or, something like that. Go ahead and get everything sort of ready for this new person. We are going to be talking specifically about introducing a new character, though there are probably a couple of things that I'll mention in here about sort of involving the new player as well, because we don't all have the same luxury that somewhere like Critical Role or Dimension 20 or et cetera, would have, where they have access to the media archive where they can go back and watch everything that has happened so far. So the people that are bringing in the new player are going to need to do a little bit of legwork in order to actually make this transition work and make it work well. So in introducing a new player, the most important part of actually getting that character in is, before they get to the table, is setting up that character for success. And that is where the 3 things come in. This is getting that character primed and ready to go in the most effective way possible for the actual game that you're going to be running. First off, you need to have it set up in such a way that whatever point they're entering the story, be it down here, up here, over here, wherever it is, their goal needs to align in some capacity with the current player party goal. That could be something as simple as they also want to be paid for this, and they happen to be in the same bar, so they are going to be tagging along on this adventure, and as they go through the adventure, they realize, oh, hey, we make a pretty good team. We could get paid a little bit more if we all stick together, and it forms naturally like that, the same way a normal party would. Or it could be something as weirdly complicated as they are a prison guard where the party is imprisoned, and the party has slowly but surely turned them to be kind of on their side, so they're assisting in a prison break, but they don't want to get caught and be identified as a corrupt guard, and the party doesn't want to get caught and thrown into like full lockdown. It becomes a whole thing, but they are still working toward an aligned goal. Honestly, the goal setting part of this is something that should be true in introducing a new party to itself as well. Really, all three of these should line up with that, but this one in particular is when you are forming a new party and you need all of the characters to be like, yes, we want to do this one particular thing. It's the you meet in a tavern, somebody wants to pay you to do a job, you're all conveniently there, and you're like, well, we could do this together. It is that, but you are adding a single person instead of trying to collect your entire table of players into one contiguous line, essentially. So you need to make sure that the goal of this new character aligns in such a way with the existing party that the existing party wants to actually bring them in. Obviously, there is the above the table, like, hey, this is the character of the new person, let's, kind of cut them a little bit more slack than we might normally. But you don't want to have it be that your characters act just totally out of character and go, yep, you're good no matter what, if they haven't trusted a single person that they've come across so far. You want it to be a little bit of like actual in-game earning of trust, so that there is that sort of like build up and a more organic feel of the character coming on in the party. Number 2, this one is interesting to me actually because it feels obvious and it feels pretty easy, but at the same time, I have met D&D players and I know that they oftentimes like the opposite of this. The second one that I have written down here is that the backstory needs to be engaging. So the backstory of the player that is coming on oftentimes is going to need to have a short-term goal in it that's associated with what the players are doing, but they need to have some kind of hook in their backstory for why they are a cool enough character to bring along with the party in this scenario. Better than just like, I'm good at fighting, because a lot of people are good at fighting, and they oftentimes go to the highest bidder. So you want to make sure that it's actually something that like is intriguing enough for your party to want to bring along with them. That said, Boblin the Goblin is a meme on the internet for a reason, and it is not necessarily untrue. The party will adopt anything with a pulse and at least half a brain cell. So, take that one kind of with a grain of salt, I guess. If you're playing a more serious game, you definitely want to make sure that you have this sort of like idea set up where the characters are maybe just trusting this person because it seems like they have as much skin in the fight as them, etc., etc. This one really does go hand in hand with that goal concept, at least. So you want to make sure that your backstory here is going to help inform the goal in such a way that allows the backstory to be something that the players that are already at the table latch onto and dig into, and makes the new player / character a very intriguing addition, so that they are then more readily able to be sort of like swallowed up by the party and assimilated into the party as part of their crew. The third thing is a little bit different than the previous two, but it is still pretty inherently well tied to it. Oftentimes, with the short-term goal that is associated with the immediate backstory hook, this is sort of that third prong of it, even though it does drift a little further away, which is kind of ironic because I just labeled this third thing as float, which essentially means that, as with any D&D character, there needs to be a certain amount of floatiness to the character. There needs to be an amount of wanderlust or amount of exile or something like that that has created the need for this character to be able to leave whatever situation they're in. Once whatever their quest hook is, there needs to be enough of a reason for them to want to stick around with the party. And by that I mean there needs to be little enough reason for them to want to stay where they're at. They are going to have to actually just pick up and go. They're going to need to wander away with the party in such a way that makes it an organic break from wherever they were and sort of slide in. Later edition characters, that are later added, there we go, are in fact oftentimes the ones that float even more than other things. Early game, like start of the table characters, a lot of times will be like forced from their homes, need to do this thing to reconcile with their family, blah, 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 blah. And later game characters kind of just have to be floaters. They have to be wanderers that are just kind of off on their own, doing their own thing. They don't have to be that, but it is oftentimes just easier if they are that already, so that there is not really that like draw to stick around where they are, because the reality is that they are not going to have the anchor in their character backstory that the rest of the party is going to care about enough for them to want to accommodate that in some way. If you are, we'll say 20 sessions in and you're working on introducing this new character, and that new character is around for 3 sessions, and then there's this backstory anchor from the new character that's been there for 3 sessions that's like, oh man, I have to stay here. I have to stay with my home so that this thing doesn't happen. And at the same time, there is something over here that is a backstory anchor for the character that has been there since session 1, with the now on their 23rd session instead of their 3rd. The party is going to drift towards that 23 as opposed to the 3. So you kind of inherently have to have a little bit more floatiness until you make it far enough in to where the rapport has been built and it makes sense for that character to be something that can help orient the course of the party as they are going through their adventure. Because honestly, it takes a little while to get there. It always does. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually, in fact, the way that the world works in general. So it's definitely not a bad thing to have that be the case with your D&D game as well. It is just something you have to keep in mind, because a lot of times you'll spend all this time talking to the other players at a game, getting excited about your character, being ready for stuff, and then you sit down and you're like, great, I'm here. And you have to realize that those new players, or those players that know all that stuff about your character, their characters don't know anything about that character, and they couldn't care less about your character in that moment. It's just the way that it goes, and you have to make sure that you are helping that new player, or if you are that new player, you have to be doing all of the work to try and make yourself as useful to these people as possible, and then being able to float away with them as they leave. You need to be able to essentially hitch onto the wagon and just sort of ride it out. Let it happen for a while until you have become an integrated part of that story. And that is oftentimes actually very, very difficult to do. But that is what the DM and the slightly metagame part of it, where the players kind of have to favor you no matter what because of the way that it works. That is what that is all about. You, as a table there, need to make the accommodation to let the other person in, etc. So those are my 3 kind of prongs for how to make the transition for a new player into the table as easy as possible. Additionally, having different people run through notes with the new person is always helpful, so that they have some kind of catch up, because again, there is no media library backup the same way that like Critical Role or Dimension 20 or NADPOD or etc would have. So run through notes, give a story rundown. When you are crafting that character's backstory as the DM and that new player, you should really be having a lot of those conversations so that they actually do know what is generally going on with the story up to that point, even if their character wouldn't necessarily know that. Yeah. So putting in that kind of work, making sure that all of that sort of lines up, is the best way to introduce a new player to your table when you're mid-campaign already. That is my three-prong approach, if you can call it that. They're just three sort of points that I really, really think are good to keep in mind as you're going through that whole process. Now, moving on to the shows that we have tonight and tomorrow. It is Wednesday, which means that we have Dimension 20, Noctoprone, Venture Maidens, Trials and Trebuchets, and Roll Out. And then tomorrow, on Thursday, we have Critical Role, Authors and Dragons, LGBT D&D, and NADPOD. Please go check them out. Let them know that I sent you because, again, at some point somebody's going to say something to me. I'm going to think that it's hysterical. Today has not come yet, but it will come eventually. So, with all that said, that is everything I have to talk to you guys about today. Thank you very much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that make this show possible. If you're interested in becoming a patron, please check out the link in the description of this episode. You can find all the extra information there. You guys are the best. Thank you so very much. So, with all that said, don't forget, everybody. Drink tea, play D&D, and keep on rolling.